Every year, thousands of hikers set out to conquer mountains, forests, and remote trails, but not all of them make it back. Between 1947 and 2018, there were 2,799 reports of mountaineering accidents, including hiking, with 43% of these accidents resulting in fatalities. While hiking is a relatively safe outdoor activity, it still carries risks, especially in harsh terrain and unpredictable conditions. Some hikers make fatal mistakes, while others vanish without a trace. From mysterious disappearances to gruesome discoveries, these are the most disturbing hiking deaths ever recorded. Kris and Lisanne Froon were supposed to have the trip of a lifetime. Two Dutch students, fresh out of school, eager to explore, help local children, and soak in the beauty of Panama. They planned everything down to the last detail, saving money for 6 months, studying Spanish, and mapping out their adventure. But on April 1st, 2014, their hike into the dense jungles near Bouquet turned into something no one could have expected. They walked into the forest that morning, smiling in selfies, full of excitement, and they never walked out. Let's break this down, because what happened next is one of the most disturbing mysteries out there. When Kris and Lisanne didn't return home that night, their host family got concerned. Their dog had made it back, but the two women were nowhere to be seen. Still, they waited until morning to raise the alarm. On April 2nd, the girls missed an appointment with a local tour guide. Now, this was serious. Calls were made, searches began, and within days, their families had flown in from the Netherlands. Helicopters, search dogs, local police, everyone scoured the area, but nothing. Then, 10 weeks later, the first clues surfaced. A local woman walked into a police station carrying a blue backpack she found near a river in Alto Romero, miles from where the women had started their hike. Inside were 2 pairs of sunglasses, $83 in cash, a water bottle, 2 bras, Lisanne's passport, and, most important, both of their phones and a camera. Here's where things start getting really strange. The phones told a terrifying story. They had been used for nearly 10 days after the women went missing. The first emergency call happened on April 1st at 4:39 p.m., just hours into their hike. A second attempt came from the other phone at 4:51 p.m. Both failed due to weak reception. Over the next 4 days, 77 calls were made to emergency numbers. 77. Just let that sink in. And not one got through, except for a single call on April 3rd that lasted only 2 seconds before dropping. By April 6th, things got even stranger. Someone was trying to unlock Kris's iPhone, but the wrong PIN was entered. It was never unlocked again. That means one of 2 things. Either Kris was too injured to enter it herself, or someone else was holding the phone. Either way, it's disturbing. By April 11th, both phones were completely dead. But what about the camera? The first few pictures were normal. Smiling faces, bright blue skies, a scenic trail. But then came the second set, taken in the pitch-black jungle between 1 and 4 a.m. on April 8th. Over 90 photos. Some show scattered belongings, plastic bags, candy wrappers, a mirror on a rock. Others seem random, just darkness and flashes of light. But one stands out, a blurry shot of the back of Kris's head, her red hair barely visible, and blood near her temple. By this point, authorities had zero doubt. Something terrible happened in that jungle. And 2 months after the backpack was found, the evidence became even more chilling. Search teams discovered Kris's denim shorts folded neatly on a rock. Then came the bones, a boot with a foot still inside, a pelvic bone, and then 33 more bones scattered along the riverbank. DNA tests confirmed they belonged to Kris and Lisanne. Here's where the mystery deepens. Lisanne's bones had some tissue still attached, meaning natural decomposition. But Kris's bones? Pure white, as if they had been bleached. Experts said they showed no signs of cuts, no animal bites, nothing. Just smooth, clean bones, completely out of place in a jungle full of scavengers. That's all we know for now, but the truth is out there, buried under the trees, lost in time. Mount Marapi, towering at 2,891 meters, is known as the Mountain of Fire for a reason. One of the most active volcanoes in Indonesia, it had been restless for years. Officials had warned hikers to stay at least 3 kilometers away from the crater, but permits were still issued. Trails remained open, and that Sunday morning, 75 hikers set out, completely unaware that their climb was about to turn into a nightmare. They started their ascent on December 2nd, 2023, camping overnight before making their final push to the peak. It was the kind of trip hikers live for: cool mountain air, endless views, and the quiet thrill of reaching the summit. By noon on December 3rd, most had made it. Some were snapping photos, others were catching their breath. Then, at exactly 2:54 p.m., the ground trembled. A deafening explosion ripped through the sky. In less than 5 minutes, a massive column of ash shot 3,000 meters into the air. The mountain unleashed its fury. Hot ash, rocks, and a burning cloud of gas raced down the slopes. There was no time to react, no warning. 1 second, clear skies. The next, total chaos. Hikers near the crater never stood a chance. The intense heat burned everything in its path. Many were instantly overwhelmed, their bodies later found fused to the scorched ground. Further down, those who could still move ran for their lives, choking on thick black smoke. Rocks rained down like missiles. One hiker, Mohammed Fadli, barely had time to shield himself before a flying rock shattered his finger. Another crushed his leg. His group tried to find shelter, ducking behind boulders as the eruption continued to rage. Families desperately tried to call loved ones on the mountain, but there was no signal. For the hikers, survival now meant one thing: getting down fast. Rescue teams sprang into action, but the volcano wasn't done yet. Over the next 24 hours, it erupted 46 more times. Ash and debris made it nearly impossible to reach the stranded climbers. Still, search teams pushed forward. They carried survivors down the mountain, their faces burned, their clothes shredded. Some hikers had been trapped for hours, waiting in silence, hoping the mountain wouldn't bury them alive. By nightfall, 52 hikers had been rescued, suffering from burns and fractures. The search continued through the night, with rescuers digging through layers of ash and hardened lava. When they found bodies, they were burned beyond recognition. The heat had been so intense that identification was impossible without DNA testing. On December 6th, the final victim was recovered, bringing the total death toll to 23. Every single one had been found near the crater, where the eruption had been the most violent. The mountain had given no mercy. The question remained: why were hikers allowed so close to a volcano that had been showing signs of unrest? Scientists had warned for years that Marapi's eruptions were unpredictable. Some hikers even reported seeing monkeys fleeing the mountain just before the explosion. Nature knew what was coming. Humans didn't listen. And Marapi, it wasn't finished. It erupted again on December 22nd, and again in January 2024. The warnings had always been there, but for 75 hikers on that mountain, they came too late. The Himalayas, home to the world's highest peaks, draw thousands of adventurers every year. Towering mountains, endless skies, ancient trails, it's a dream for hikers. In May 2012, 23-year-old Belgian traveler Debbie Mavot set off on a 6-day trek through Langtang National Park. She had spent 3 months in Nepal, volunteering, working with children, and exploring. This hike was supposed to be the perfect way to end her trip before heading home to Belgium on June 9th. She never made it back. Debbie started her journey on May 31st, taking a bus from Kathmandu to Donche, a small city at the edge of the national park. From there, she planned to reach Gosaikunda, a sacred alpine lake hidden deep in the mountains. The trek was challenging but popular. Other hikers passed through the area daily, but something went terribly wrong. Days passed, and no one heard from her. On June 14th, exactly 14 days after she was last seen, villagers stumbled upon a body near a hiking trail. It was badly decomposed, barely recognizable, but there was no mistaking one horrifying detail. Debbie's head was lying 13 inches from her body. The scene was brutal, and yet nothing was stolen. Her camera and money were still there, even her clothes remained untouched. This wasn't a robbery. This wasn't an accident. Someone had murdered her. Local authorities launched an investigation, but getting answers wasn't easy. The villagers claimed they hadn't seen anything. Bus drivers didn't remember her. There were no witnesses, no suspects, just silence. Nepalese police confirmed that she had been violently killed, possibly with a machete. But beyond that, there were no clear leads. And here's the chilling part. Debbie wasn't the first woman to go missing in this area. In December 2011, American hiker Lena Sessions was attacked by a man with a knife while hiking alone in Langtang. She escaped. A South Korean woman was assaulted around the same time, and 2 years earlier, University of Colorado student Aubrey Caroline Sacco had disappeared in the same park. Her body was never found. The pattern was impossible to ignore. The U.S. State Department even issued warnings telling tourists to avoid hiking alone, but it wasn't enough to stop the tragedies. Back in Belgium, Debbie's family was shattered. She had gone to Nepal to help others, to experience the world, to chase adventure. Instead, she had been brutally murdered on a quiet mountain trail. Her mother spoke of how they had been waiting to welcome her home. Instead, they were burying her. And the case, it went nowhere. Years passed, no arrests, no suspects. Debbie's father, Frankie Mavo, admitted that he had lost hope. He couldn't even look at a map of Nepal without feeling sick. In 2017, 5 years after her death, her final remains were released from a mortuary in Kathmandu. But her killer, still out there. At 66, Geraldine Largay had already trekked more than 1,000 miles from Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, with her best friend Jane Lee. They had planned to take on the Appalachian Trail together, 2,168 miles of rugged terrain stretching from Georgia to Maine. They had a system: hike, rest, meet up with Geraldine's husband George at pre-planned locations for supplies, then do it all over again. But on June 30th, everything changed. Jane had to leave due to a family emergency. Geraldine, trail name Inchworm for her slow but steady pace, decided to continue alone. She had fears. She was scared of being alone. She had a terrible sense of direction. Even Jane had admitted that Geraldine struggled with navigation and had taken wrong turns before. But she was determined. By July 22nd, she was closing in on the final stretch, just 200 miles from the end of the trail. That morning, at around 6:30 a.m., another hiker snapped a photo of her at the Poplar Ridge lean-to, a simple wooden shelter on the trail. She was smiling, her backpack strapped tight, socks pulled high to keep out bugs. It would be the last photo ever taken of her. Sometime before 11 a.m., she stepped off the trail to relieve herself. And then, she was gone. She never made it back to the path. Thick underbrush, dense fir trees, a forest so wild that even experienced hikers said losing the trail was like stepping into another world. She panicked. Her phone had no signal. She tried texting George at 11:01 a.m. "In some trouble," she wrote. "Got off trail to go to BR, now lost." The message never sent. She climbed to higher ground, hoping for reception. Nothing. 10 more attempts in the next hour and a half. All failed. By the next day, George was waiting for her at their meeting spot. She never arrived. He called for help. The search began. For weeks, rescue teams scoured the woods. Helicopters flew overhead. Search dogs sniffed the ground. Hikers were questioned. False leads poured in. People swore they had seen her. Others believed she had been murdered. Psychics called in with visions of her location. But the truth? She was less than 2 miles from the trail. On July 23rd, Geraldine set up camp on a small patch of dry land. She laid out her black tent, carefully arranged her belongings, and prepared to wait. She tried another text. Still nothing. She hung a reflective silver blanket between trees, hoping searchers would spot the shine. She even attempted to start a fire. The trees nearby were scorched, but the flames never caught. She survived for 26 days. Her journal, found next to her body, revealed everything. She wrote daily. Notes to George, to her daughter Carrie, a log of the days passing. On August 6th, she made peace with her fate. "When you find my body, please call my husband George and my daughter Carrie," she wrote. "It will be the greatest kindness for them to know that I am dead and where you found me, no matter how many years from now." Her last entry was dated August 18th. Whether that date was accurate, no one knows. For over 2 years, her disappearance remained a mystery. Then, on October 14th, 2015, a forester working for the U.S. Navy stumbled across a flattened tent deep in the woods. A backpack sat outside. Inside the tent, a zipped-up sleeping bag, a human skull. It was Geraldine. She had been just 30 minutes from a clear logging road. A little farther, and she might have been saved. But instead, she sat alone in the wilderness, waiting for help that never came. Maren Ueland and Louisa Vesterager Jespersen had planned a trip filled with adventure. 2 best friends, 2 outdoor lovers, 2 future tour guides studying at the University of Southeastern Norway. They wanted to explore the world, to chase new experiences, to see places others only dreamed of. And in December 2018, their destination was set, Morocco. They would hike the Atlas Mountains, trek through breathtaking landscapes, and camp beneath the stars. They arrived in Marrakesh on December 9th. From there, they traveled to Imlil, a small village known as the gateway to Mount Toubkal, North Africa's highest peak. Everything was going according to plan. They had taken precautions, studied the route, and were prepared for the journey ahead. This was supposed to be another adventure to add to their long list of travels. They had done this before, but something was different this time. 4 men had been watching, studying them, following them, and 4 days later, they struck. On December 17th, 2 French hikers stumbled upon a horrific scene near a remote trail. A tent, 2 bodies, beheaded. The victims were identified as Maren and Louisa. What had happened to them was worse than anyone had imagined. It didn't take long for police to find a lead. Among their belongings left behind in the tent was an ID card, not from the women, but from one of the killers. That same day, police arrested a man named Abderrahim Kayali, and soon after, 3 more suspects were caught boarding a bus in Marrakesh. They were terrorists. Days before the murders, they had filmed themselves pledging allegiance to ISIS, vowing to kill in the name of their twisted beliefs. And when they found Maren and Louisa alone in the mountains, they saw an opportunity. They had searched for victims, watching for travelers without guides, waiting for the perfect moment. When they found the women's tent, they made their move. The attack was brutal. The killers filmed it, spreading their act of terror online. One of the women had 23 stab wounds. The world reacted in shock. Protests erupted in Morocco, with thousands condemning the crime. Vigils were held in Norway and Denmark. But justice came swiftly. In July 2019, a Moroccan court sentenced them to death, but the families of the victims pushed for further accountability, demanding that the Moroccan government take responsibility for allowing known extremists to roam freely. For Maren and Louisa's families, no verdict could bring their daughters back. No ruling could erase what happened in those mountains. They had come to Morocco seeking wonder. Instead, they became victims of horror.